people just want to be left alone, and they don't want their money to depreciate overnight. And I think those are reasonable asks. I think those are legal asks. I think we're well within our rights to take up Bitcoin as a financial peaceful revolution.
Hi, and welcome to the FinancialFox, finance, investment, and crypto with a twist. I'm your host, Steffy B. I'm the founder of PR company Cassiopeia Services, and every week I bring to you my favorite conversations with investment experts, market disruptors, mover and shakers, and the coolest project in crypto. Today is all about Bitcoin. My guest is one of the directors of the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world. George Mekhail is a Bitcoin author, co-founder of BitcoinIs, and director of the Bitcoin conference coming up in April 2022, Bitcoin Miami. Before we go into the episode, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, click the subscribe button and follow us on social media to stay up to date with our news and interviews. And finally, remember that all the content here is for informational purposes only, and we don't give any financial advice. So before making an investment decision, make sure that you do your own due diligence and research. This episode is brought to you by CoinPass, the fast, secure, and compliant, they are FCA regulated, crypto trading platform for investors, traders, and businesses in the UK. They have a very attractive referral program where you can earn up to 20% commission. You can find more information in the description to open your account and start trading today. Hi, George, how are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm really excited about this chat because I really want to dive deep into Bitcoin and all kind of like issue or opportunities related to that. And, who could be the best person than, one of the director of the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to share with you about the conference and talk Bitcoin.
Fantastic. So let's start with the $1 billion question. Why Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think for your audience, or one that's very savvy in the financial markets and sort of understanding crypto more and more, the biggest distinction I like to make is that Bitcoin is the original cryptocurrency, right? Even before that term was even popular, Bitcoin existed. Ethereum came much later in the process, and then all of the other forks came after that. And the typical sort of, I guess, Bitcoin maximalist perspective on this, and I would consider myself a maximalist to a certain extent, but I take a different approach when it comes to talking about alternative currencies, and that is, to me, it's like gambling, like anything else. It's like if you know what you're doing, if you're a trader, it can be a profession, in fact. But if you don't know what you're doing, like me, then Bitcoin stands on its own in the sense that it's trying to do something completely different than these other coins, and it's trying to be the world reserve currency, and it's trying to help people who are enslaved by the current system in ways that I don't think other assets can do. So I think the most important thing is to make sure that we're talking about Bitcoin in a completely separate category, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think one of the important and valuable, actually, things that we saw about Bitcoin, even recently with all this geopolitical tension with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is actually how Bitcoin can be an amazing tool for humanitarian aid. Then nothing can be comparable to. So maybe I would like actually to understand what is your opinion and on the role of Bitcoin, more like on a macro scale, geopolitical and economic scale.
Definitely. Well, first and foremost, I see it as an opportunity for humanity as a whole to overcome all of our financial challenges that we have, right? We're sort of enslaved to this monetary system where we're not in control of how much money gets added to the supply, and the money that we earn, that we slave away for every day, is being inflated, and it's losing its value, and we're losing our purchasing power. And so first and foremost, I see it as a tool for a global economic revolution that anyone can participate in. So whether you're in Ukraine and you need a way to receive money because your bank's been shut down, or your local currency has lost half of its purchasing power overnight. I mean, it's unheard of that we're able to send value across the globe, almost instantly, and do it without the permission of any banks, without the permission of any governments, without the risk of seizure, without the risk of censorship. If used properly, Bitcoin can really revolutionize some of these tools that were previously unheard of.
Okay, and I think that was a very important point. And there are quite a few challenges still, and I would like to go through all of them. So if we are talking about Bitcoin scalability, Bitcoin seems to be kind of like a world on its own, even though there are applications of Bitcoin, there is Stripes, payment are possible through the Lightning Network. How do you see Bitcoin become more like a scalable asset, and so that it can bring more, it can build an economy on a bigger scale? Do you think that is possible?
Absolutely. And I think the adoption of the Lightning Network is the most obvious thing to point to of how Bitcoin is scaling. And I think this conversation was very different in 2017, when a lot of ICOs were coming on the scene and a lot of new coins were being created for the reason of Bitcoin doesn't scale fast enough. Payments are too expensive. And that line of thinking is kind of what spurned the Bitcoin community to really push forward Lightning development. And now what we're seeing with Lightning adoption is like almost a greater adoption curve than Bitcoin originally. So the issue of scalability, there's a lot of encouraging things happening with Bitcoin as the base layer. Not only do you have Lightning, you also have other L2s and like the Liquid network, which there's trade-offs to Lightning, there's trade-offs to Liquid, there's all sorts of trade-offs. But if Bitcoin can be the base layer that we can all agree on, I think that just gets us to our shared goal a lot faster. I think one of the most unfortunate things about the history of Bitcoin is some of these, early fork wars, where these were some of the debates that people were having. I wasn't around for them, but, in sort of reading and trying to understand Bitcoin history, it seems like there was, a clear dispute over whether or not, the block size wars, whether or not we could scale Bitcoin with the current configuration. And it's unfortunate because the people who sort of got upset and I guess didn't win that argument, didn't get their way, they're still like-minded, and they share a lot of the same ethos and a lot of the same principles that Bitcoiners have, which is freedom, technology, and sound money. And so those are kind of some of my laments in terms of how do we reconcile the community, because I think the technology is going to scale, but what we need to do a better job of is education and collaboration, right? It doesn't need to be this constant battle over this chain or that chain. Like, we can all come together on the Bitcoin blockchain and really build and scale from here.
I like this. I like a lot this point that you actually made. That obviously the technology is there and is going to improve. And that's the easy bit. The challenge is actually Bitcoin education. Is kind of Bitcoin adoption as well. And this is kind of like part of the mission of your company, BitcoinIs. So how we can normalize Bitcoin for everyday life, so Bitcoin can be the solution to the humanity's biggest problems. So would you like maybe to shed some light on your vision, and what's your contribution to make that possible?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, me personally, where I'm the most passionate is just making sure that we are effectively communicating the message of Bitcoin, because as a decentralized network with no CEO, with no headquarters, we have no marketing team. We have to do this work as the people who are participating in building the network, whether we're miners or we're running nodes or we're just participants in the network, or we're building businesses. And so I think education is such a broad topic, but it's I think it's a unique problem for us to solve in this decentralized manner, right? It's like trying to market gold or educate people about gold, when there's no direct incentive for people to do that, right? Like, either get some gold or don't, right? And clearly at this phase in adoption, though, there are benefits to the network growing and people understanding what's going on. I think the subtle nuance with sort of education or marketing, and like I'm the director of marketing for the Bitcoin conference, and the title is not my favorite because I think that the word marketing has so many negative connotations and that I'm like not comfortable with. I think a more accurate way to describe it is education, and it's just the more people you just tell plainly the plain facts about Bitcoin, the more you're like, wow, this thing sells itself. It markets itself. You really don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting other than just tell people the facts. And, some of the best advertising or marketing that's been happening for Bitcoin lately has been things like the trucker convoy in Canada, things like Ukrainians being able to receive money. Like that's the real marketing power of it. Once, when governments get so oppressive that they're shutting down people's bank accounts for donating money to causes that they disagree with, that's a great advertisement for Bitcoin, right? So I don't think we have to try too hard to market Bitcoin. I think it kind of markets itself. But I do think that we should have a greater emphasis on the important elements of educating people about why Bitcoin is unique.
Yeah, that's also another. You just hit the point. It's not about trying to sell something. It's about to raise awareness. It's about to educate, and also it's about to kind of explain what are really the advantages, perhaps for individuals. I mean, that might be the easiest, but also for businesses to adopt Bitcoin.
Definitely. So for individuals, I think my favorite place to start with people is to explain Bitcoin as savings technology first and foremost. Like help people remember the times if they're millennial age, or even if you're in like your mid-20s or older. It's like there used to be a time when we would save money. You would earn some money and you would put that towards your bills, and then the rest, whatever was left over, you'd put that in a savings account and you wouldn't think about it for a while.
Yeah, in the piggy or under the mattress. Yeah.
Right. We don't do that anymore. Like culturally, I think we've become so conditioned to our money losing value so rapidly that we earn money and then it goes out the door. And that's where things like, and when I talk about crypto, a lot of crypto, like meme coins and stuff being like gambling, that's what I'm talking about. It's like we have this urge to be like the dollars are like burning our pockets, right? We want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. So Bitcoin comes in and it says, no, you need to change your habits. You need to start putting away some of this money that you've earned, that you've put your time towards. And the idea is that on a long enough time horizon, or as or to use an economic term, it's on a low enough time preference. If you have a low enough time preference, that Bitcoin is going to be worth more than it was. And this has been true every single year of Bitcoin's existence. If you've held it long enough, you're ahead, right? And that used to be the case with savings accounts, right? You just hang on to it, and then your money is, at least it's worth the same. It has the same purchasing power. But like in our parents' generation, it would be like later on in life, your savings account actually had more purchasing power than when you started putting money away. And so think about Bitcoin in those terms first and foremost. So savings technology first, and then the second analogy is digital gold. Right. And no analogy is perfect, but, and everyone's heard these, but really explaining Bitcoin through the lens of this is the digital gold rush, right? So when you had the gold rush, it wasn't like people were going into like California or wherever the gold, like main gold rushes were, and they're panning for gold. And they're also like pulling out their phone and seeing what the price of gold is every 2 seconds, right? We have this dynamic now where we can monitor what the exact price of Bitcoin is in real time. But we already know that it's this extremely valuable, scarce asset. Just like the people that were panning for gold, all they knew about it was like, this stuff is valuable. I need to get me some, right? They weren't sitting there figuring out, I wonder how much I can sell it for today or how much I can sell it for tomorrow. They were like, I'm just going to get some because look at all these people that are over here getting some. So that's where we're at with Bitcoin adoption, is we're in an accumulation zone. So it's all about, you've heard the term stacking sats, or it's all about just accumulating Bitcoin, getting some, putting it aside, not really thinking about it. You've heard the meme, the hodl meme, right? Just hold on and just like, don't think about it. I think that's the best way to introduce the advantages to an individual.
Okay, before we go into the business, let me stop you here because you mentioned gold. And that's kind of a conversation that is interesting because some people basically say, okay, Bitcoin is the new gold or the gold of the new generation. Some others, they argue gold is actually an hedge against inflation and has been like that for decades, where Bitcoin is not an hedge against inflation, is actual volatile assets and is more similar to a tech stock. So I would like to maybe you to kind of break that down a bit and tell me why, if that is the case, you think Bitcoin is a competitor of gold, and maybe why it's not a tech stock or otherwise.
So to be clear, I don't think Bitcoin is a competitor to gold. I think Bitcoin is on a completely different level. I think the analogy is helpful, but I think it falls short in describing Bitcoin's true impact on humanity and what it actually accomplishes as a technology. It can do so much more than gold. But to address the question, I think this is kind of where the imagery I'm painting about the gold rush comes into play, because yeah, sure, it's volatile right now because we have our phones in our pockets that tell us the actual trading price at any given moment. That is being confused with the actual value of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoiners and anyone who understands the scarcity element of 21 million hard cap of supply knows that the value of Bitcoin is very different than the current USD exchange rate, right? Yeah. And so you can't make that claim that you can make the claim that the price is volatile on a daily basis, but you can't really make the claim that the value is volatile, in my opinion. Once the market fully understands what's really happening, that's when you're going to start seeing sort of the gradually, then suddenly, the exponential, the parabolic, the super cycle, all of the future things that we feel like are happening. And it's important to keep in mind that Bitcoiners have been right up until now. We kind of overshot on our 100K prediction. I think we were very confident that we were going to hit 100K last year, but it's in terms of parabolic moves, 4-year cycles with the halving, scarcity really starting to get priced in. It's continued to happen, right? Like there's a clear up and to the right trajectory of where Bitcoin is going. And so anyone who says it's volatile is right on a very, very short time horizon. But if you zoom out, it's volatile to the upside.
Yeah, I mean, in 2021, we saw the institution coming to the space. That was big. And then we saw countries like El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. So that kind of like massive event. And now we are also seeing Switzerland, which is kind of conservative and also proactive in a way, but start to introduce Bitcoin that was from the city of Lugano, adopting Bitcoin and Tether, and also advertising that to their businesses. So those are kind of like a really big milestone for a new asset class.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as far as just to kind of go back to your question about businesses, there are definitely some clear advantages that at the individual level apply to business owners, obviously. But the best sort of analogy or explanation for business owners to me is that it's like accepting cash, but better, right? So the advantages of cash over accepting a credit card for a business owner are obvious. Instant settlement. Here's your money. I don't have to pay any transaction fees. It's anonymous. You can, decide how you want to file your taxes and all that kind of stuff just based on your individual reality, right? A taco stand accepting cash has very different set of expectations, I think, than a babysitter who is accepting cash than a garage sale, right? But for businesses too, there's a huge advantage to not having chargebacks. So we're talking about risk-free transactions where you're no longer on the hook if somebody is buying your goods and services with a stolen credit card or is going to charge you back because of fraud or whatever else. So I think businesses have a lot to gain. And I think you're seeing local municipalities now pay attention to this as well, because they realize that they've actually become clients of, I don't know if this is true. I don't know Switzerland politics or sort of how their municipalities are set up, but we're also seeing legal tender laws here in the U.S., right? Where local municipalities or states are taking this seriously because they're realizing they're clients of the federal government, and the more they can get local, and the more that they can have their own sort of circular economy created at the local level without having to be dependent on the federal government, the more advantageous it's going to be to them and to their citizens. So I think that's what we're seeing in Switzerland. I think that's certainly what drove Bitcoin legal tender law to take place in El Salvador, because it started with a little beach town called El Zonte. that was creating a Bitcoin local economy, a local circular economy. And what you saw was essentially flourishing in that little beach town. People were becoming wealthier because their money was being held in Bitcoin. And so that's probably the best example that we have of what happens when you adopt a Bitcoin circular economy with, having sound money as your base currency.
Yeah,
so.
and he's in a way is anonymous, but he's also transparent.
Yeah,
that is kind of like the beauty, kind of seamless in a way.
Absolutely.
Now, there are a few other elements that I would like to touch, but you mentioned gold is not, I don't think, is a competitor of Bitcoin. What do you feel? I'm not saying. I just want you to bring up CBDCs. Obviously, they are not competitor, but do you feel that the crypto community can be threatened by these new digital assets that the government is pushing, like CBDCs?
I believe that the crypto community, yes. I believe that Bitcoin has an advantage that if used properly, if the right tools are used to preserve anonymity and to increasingly transact in a way that's local and peer-to-peer, probably is a better word than local, but I think local is relevant. I don't think there's anything the government can do to stop that. So again, this goes back to Bitcoin being in a different category than cryptocurrencies. I think there's a clear case for governments to declare every cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin a security. I think that's going to create a lot of challenges for the centralized figureheads of those currencies. But when it comes to Bitcoin, there's nobody to subpoena into court. There's nobody to fine. And there's no way to confiscate the asset unless it's on an exchange, right? So I think they're going to come down hard on cryptocurrencies as a way to try to scare Bitcoiners. But I think that ultimately that's just going to further adoption. And I think that's where the game theory really kicks in. Is like you have to be careful if you're a government how much you want to come down hard on people who are really just trying to preserve their wealth. There's no you can call them criminals or you can say it's used for illicit activity, but it's pretty plain to see that people just want to be left alone and they don't want their money to depreciate overnight. And I think those are reasonable asks. I think those are legal asks. I think we're well within our rights to take up Bitcoin as a financial peaceful revolution.
Yeah, there is the element of regulation that obviously is kicking in. And that was a consideration that I was actually making today. When a government legalizes and regulates something, then at the same time, there is also the flip side, which perhaps now is we need to raise more money from taxes. So rather than tax the current businesses that are already suffering from the pandemic, right? Let's tax new businesses like crypto businesses or gaming, cannabis. They've done that in the past. And the tax rate can be so high that can actually impact those businesses. So it's kind of like we all have to be a bit skeptical on movement than that the government is pushing towards us. I think that
totally, absolutely, and they've been abusing this power now at a alarming rate of one crisis to the other is justification for printing more money, and that's just historically has never gone well for governments or societies. So I co-authored a book called Thank God for Bitcoin. And that sentiment is kind of where I end up every time I go down this road of like, wow, things are getting really bad out there. And man, thank God we have Bitcoin as a tool to escape the madness.
Okay, let's now discuss two other big challenges of Bitcoin. One is the sustainability, specifically regarding energy consumption. We have seen, obviously, China ban on crypto mining. Then there were conversation in European Union about banning proof of work. Luckily, they didn't, but they were talking about it. How do you think this issue can be solved?
So, I think Bitcoin's incentive structure is perfectly architected in a way to have miners be incentivized to have the most efficient use of power possible. That you find the cheapest form of power possible and use it to mine Bitcoin is kind of the name of the game. Whether that is going to, again, there's going to be an attack vector on like having renewables or this ESG narrative, and that's going to slow adoption, I don't think is really a thing, because I think, again, that's when game theory really starts kicking in. I think China shot themselves in the foot by mining Bitcoin, or by banning Bitcoin mining. And I think other countries clearly stepped up to fill that void. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was like 2 weeks before that hash rate came back online after it was banned. So that's a ridiculous level of resilience that I think is extremely underappreciated. The facts are that there is more physical infrastructure being built out around Bitcoin than anything, again, any other category that's comparable. And a lot of it is happening in parallel with the existing energy infrastructure. So current energy producers are realizing that their incentives are stronger if they partner with a Bitcoin mining operation or create their own, so that they can have a place to basically deploy excess energy that they're producing. And this is actually good for the environment, right? So we saw in Texas when a massive storm was coming, Bitcoin miners were able to sell excess energy back to the grid, or make adjustments that proved its resilience and how nimble it was, and how responsive the Bitcoin ecosystem can be to real life events in a way that the legacy system couldn't. Legacy system can't respond as quickly as the Bitcoin mining ecosystem can to something like an impending storm. And we saw that happen in real time. So I think all of these events point to really, really small scale examples of how Bitcoin just creates the perfect incentive structure for the most efficient use of energy across all sectors. And so I think we're going to keep seeing that. But what's definitely not slowing down is investment in Bitcoin mining infrastructure.
Exactly. That's an amazing point that you brought up, because we are not stuck with coal and oil, the US especially.
Right. So that's just going to keep happening. And people are going to find ways. I'm of the opinion, this is actually unpopular among many Bitcoiners, but I'm of the opinion that we're going to find the most efficient ways to use solar. We're going to find the most efficient ways to use wind to mine Bitcoin. And, it might not be optimal today because there's so much wasted and stranded gas resources that are probably need to be recovered. Like one of my favorite ways of mining Bitcoin is using gas or energy that would otherwise be flared into the atmosphere, right? So it's actually reducing pollution and it's better for the economy. But these are the conversations that people need. This is where education comes in. People just don't know that these things are actually happening, and they just read the headlines about how, Bitcoin uses more energy than some small countries or whatever. And that's as far as they look into it.
Now, we have another challenge or argument that we need to discuss, which is Bitcoin interoperability, because it looks like that Bitcoin is a world on its own, and you have Bitcoin maximalists. We just want a Bitcoin, the rest is shit. So, do you see Bitcoin build an interoperable infrastructure? I mean, there are so many other crypto projects out there. What is going to happen to them? And if Bitcoin is going to be, underpinning this economy, how can it do it without being interoperable?
So when I think about interoperability, I think of things like the Lightning Network, and I think about things like Liquid, and I think about L2s and all of the other technology that's being built on top of Bitcoin. I don't think about interoperability as far as Bitcoin to other chains, only because I just don't believe in the longevity of those projects to accomplish anything that, like, I guess I haven't seen anything that's like, this is going to be long-term sustainable. Whereas like in the same way that we just talked about, like Bitcoin mining infrastructure, the pace of its development, like not going anywhere, right? There's nothing else like that's even come close to that, not even Ethereum, in my opinion. But what I think is is the critical piece here that I think a lot of Bitcoiners miss when we talk about, this is a shit coin or whatever, is there has to be more interoperability among the human beings, in my opinion. And kind of to an earlier point, like when we had the fork wars, we lost a lot of people over ideological reasons, as opposed to or sorry, I should say that differently. We lost a lot of people who actually agreed on a lot of ideological points, but we lost them over just petty disputes, right? Like technological reasons like, well, this isn't interoperable or this isn't going to work in the future. And I think what we need to do, a lot of people come to crypto, come to Bitcoin because they want the same things. They've gone out into the world and they've seen that the world doesn't offer a lot of solutions to a lot of the problems that they're experiencing, namely their money losing value, the government's censoring them increasingly, corporations, blah blah
no
blah.
access to money as well.
Yeah, exactly. The unbanked, 100%. And so people arrive here for a lot of the same reasons, but then I think we kind of lose sight of that as we go further down our various rabbit holes. And I think we need to figure out how to tell a better story, and have a bigger tent. Like, I'm not interested in, every time I see another crypto project, I'm not interested in like berating people and telling them that they're shitcoiners or whatever else. I'm more interested in making sure that everyone understands that it's two different conversations, right? Like, I don't have a problem with what people want to do with their money. I feel a sense of responsibility, even, I would say, to make sure that people are educated that, hey, just so you know, there's something completely different happening over here with Bitcoin. So it's a totally different conversation. Everything else, cool. I'm sure it's great.
It's noise. I got it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the conference, because I guess that some of the points that we raised today are going to be also topics of the agenda of the summit. So are you excited about what we should expect? Come on, tell me more.
Yeah, definitely. I can't wait. We're just a few weeks away now. And April 6th through the 9th, Miami Beach, 500,000 square feet of space across 5 different stages. We've got 300 different companies, Bitcoin companies in the exhibitor hall that are going to be showing off all of their new products and services. We have some ridiculous speakers. Our speaker lineup this year includes the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, Michael Saylor, Elizabeth Stark, Andrew Yang, Jordan Peterson. I mean, our speakers page is full of, I think we're at like 250 speakers now. We're expecting some massive announcements, both from companies and from other guests. President Bukele has already promised a couple of big surprises. And if you'll recall, Bitcoin 2021 is when El Salvador announced that they were going to make Bitcoin legal tender. So what we're hearing this year is there's going to be even bigger news. The conference is going to be about 3 times as big as Bitcoin 2021. 4 days. The first day is Industry Day. So for anybody who wants to learn more about things like we've talked about in this conversation, like mining, the institutional side is really, Industry Day is designed for you. There's going to be opportunities if you're looking to get hired by a Bitcoin job. Definitely recommend checking out Industry Day. We're going to do a pitch day event where companies are going to pitch their Bitcoin product and service, and kind of like a Shark Tank style winner will be selected and receive an initial investment. The next 2 days, April 7th and 8th, are the general admission days, and that's kind of the main event. And then on the 4th day, we're closing it out with a music festival featuring some artists who have made headlines because they were either paid in Bitcoin or become Bitcoiners, and they're all receiving their pay in Bitcoin. Also doing a book signing event with Saifedean at that as well. And all sorts of after parties and auxiliary events. It's going to be an entire week of Bitcoin throughout Miami. So it's coming up quick. Definitely an event you don't want to miss. It's FOMO is going to start setting in here for people pretty quick, and we can see that with ticket sales. It's very predictable how last minute people are, but ticket sales just continue to accelerate as we get closer.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. But what is actually the mission that Bitcoin Miami is trying to do? I mean, it's a great event, it's a great gathering, and lots of innovation ideas, connection. But what is really the ultimate goal of the people behind the conference? Is leading this education? Is like much more?
Yeah, I love that question. Great question. So our tagline is celebration, education, hyper Bitcoinization. So those are the 3 primary objectives, right? We want to celebrate Bitcoin, all the great things that have happened in the space, all the great companies that have emerged, We want to celebrate El Salvador in a big way this year. We have a giant volcano to symbolize El Salvador's Bitcoin mining of geothermal clean energy, by the way. So celebration is a really, really big part of this. Education is the second thing. We want people to come away knowing more about Bitcoin than when they first showed up. And hyper-Bitcoinization. Ultimately, the goal here is that this is a pilgrimage for Bitcoiners. This is the annual or so event that people come from all over the globe to come together. And as a community, just by showing up, we're actually making a really big statement, right? Like, where else are you going to gather 35,000 people who are all excited about the monetary revolution? And to take physical space and to all of us sort of descend on one city is not only a lot of fun, but it's also making a huge statement to the world that this isn't going anywhere and that we're here to stay and there's going to be more of us next year. And so hyper-Bitcoinization is definitely the goal.
Yeah, it's kind of like a religion that is building up. And
yeah, a lot of people don't like it when you say that, but
it's not, because you mentioned pilgrims and
yes.
People gathering and getting bigger and bigger. It looks like, it's really a movement that
Definitely.
started and is growing and is growing. And last question, where do you see Bitcoin in 10 years time? We're talking about, we talk about religion growing and don't want to make comparison though, is wrong. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of really good analogies in that. You just kind of, some people don't, there's a lot of controversy around how you talk about it, but there's a lot of really good parallels that are helpful. I think describing it as a movement is certainly accurate. In 10 years from now, I think about Bitcoin through the lens of my two children, and they'll be adults in 10 years. And I think that the Bitcoin that they have on their wallets right now is they're going to look back on some of the conversations we had within this time frame and just be mind blown by how far things have come. I think it's going to be as big of a shift in the world and in humanity's consciousness as it was before the internet to where we're at today. And, before the internet, people you didn't even know how to talk about it. You couldn't even describe it. Like before you even had like AOL or email, trying to have language to talk about surfing the web or whatever was very challenging. We couldn't really express it, a lot of what was happening. And I think we're going to see a similar type of shift with our money. People are going to wake up to the fact that this is just better. This is a better way of having money in all its forms, as a medium of exchange, as a store of value, and as a unit of account. So I think that in 10 years from now, it's not going to be the Bitcoin community or even the phrase like I'm a Bitcoiner. I don't even think that it's not even going to be relevant. I think those are transitionary phrases to get us from where we're at to where we need to go. But I think it's just going to be like the water that we swim in at that time.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to wake up in 10 years and then see
right?
It's a better world with much more opportunity and also fairer as well.
100%.
Listen, George, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing, this conversation, your insight. I'm really looking forward for the conference.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.